Hello and welcome to Red's Business and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Barnes.
And I'm your co-host, Nigel Heyn.
Today we're sitting down with the Director of Business and Technology Performance Advisor at New Arenas Capital, Stuart Waddington. In this episode, we're speaking about maximising businesses' performance by engaging people to execute on business strategy. Stu, thanks for coming in.
Yep. Good afternoon, gents. Pleased to be here.
No problems, mate. Let's start with your background. So what have you done in your, I think, 25, 30 years in your professional career?
Well, 25 or 30 years is kind because that's just the consulting part. I've actually got my 40th school reunion in a couple of months' time. So,
mate, the podcast listeners wouldn't have got that. You didn't have to.
Yeah, no. So I've been doing a lot. Look, the last 25 or 30 years in the consulting space, as it's called, has been an interesting one because it took me about 10 years to really work out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I sort of almost fell into consulting. For me, why I like it, I love goals, and so that's in my personal life as well. Competitive sport, still doing that. But for me, I grew up in a small business family, so I've always had a real affinity for the customer and teams of people, and so I think I grew into consulting perhaps. And so over the last 25, 30 years, it's more about been getting more complex projects. Because a project is that ultimate thing when a business owner or the like wants to make change and they commit funding, teams, distraction, because projects are distracting to running the business. And there's a lot of elements I love. There's a start, there's a middle and an end. There's just a great satisfaction, I suppose, about that planning, the executing and all of the challenges that go with execution over, say, an 18-month to 2-year period. It just suits me. I don't know what else to do otherwise.
Cool. Looking forward to getting some insights in this episode from you of what some of the exciting projects you've done in your past career. Let's start just to set the scene on an example of the most exciting project that you've done.
Exciting is always a great euphemism, isn't it? Yeah. I wear my heart on my sleeve, so clients know that if they've got a problem, they know they'll get their best. And a lot of my work comes, essentially through referral. I've owned a consulting company. We grew that to about 20 people, sold out of that, and have been basically doing complex programs. So a collection of projects at any given time to bring about organisational change, and it typically involves people, processes, and technology. In many cases, organisations have made a start, haven't quite got to where they need to build that momentum through to successful conclusion. And that space really excites me. So probably the most interesting one of late, and it actually goes back pre-COVID, and that's probably why I think it's interesting, is that it was meant to be a 6 to 7 week restart of a program over in New Zealand with a big insurer. And about 4 or 5 weeks in, they asked if I'd stay for 4 months, and that 4 months ultimately became 25 months. The reason it was interesting because of how it came about, some of the challenges that we had during, including another takeover offer, and the fact that it finished and was handed over just before COVID started. And had that not happened, either I would have been stuck in New Zealand trying to finish it off, and I'm not sure how that would have been done, given that everyone all of a sudden, literally within the space of a week, had to work from home. So everything that we'd done, digital front end, new claims management systems, you name it, sort of thing. It was a transformative set of systems and processes and people change for the organisation. And then everyone had to start working from home. And there were 400,000 Kiwi customers that may not have been able to be serviced effectively had we not got that program in. And so for me, that that's sort of up there with some of the interesting ones that I've done with great impact.
It's meant to be a little project, and then COVID hit, and then it was a massive project that went up the importance chain really quickly.
That's right.
So how do people engage you historically? Is it when they try and do a rapid technology change or digital transformation project and it falls over, then you come in to pick up the pieces and put it back together? Or do they engage you first to say, hey, we want to do this transformation and consult on it?
Yeah. Look, I remember saying to a client who's become a friend, who was actually my first client in consulting, and I said to him after about 3 years of multiple projects, because, okay, Stu, you fixed that one, can you go and fix that one, etc. And this was while I was actually still working for a consulting firm. I said to him after about 2.5 years, I said, when are you going to give me a project I can start from the beginning? So that, he goes, Stu, don't you understand? That's why I get you. You see things differently, and you help create the patterns and the resilience and the like, so that the teams can actually really get focused around what we're trying to do, and then you help run it home. He said, that's why I engage you. So since that time, it's like, oh, okay, so that was a real learning moment for me. I think I was, I don't know, about 30, let's say. And that, I think, that advice at that time, that was me learning about me as much as anything else, has really provided me some bedrock about how and what I do to make sure that my client outcomes are achieved.
Some clarity. I'm looking forward to getting some insights out of it and picking your brain here. But Nigel, do you want to take this one first?
Well, it's interesting, Stu. I've known you for, I think, remember 2007 we first met, and something you've always wanted to do was challenge the status quo, right? So, going back to your history and when you were in as a business, all of that. Do you want to talk through about how your methodology, which I remember as F.A.C.T.S, such a strong methodology that I still remember to this day, 14, 15 years ago. How did that come about? Was it the thing you were doing with the F.A.C.T business over in the UK? Right. And can you talk a bit about that? Because I think it's a great story to tell.
Oh, look, that was me getting myself out of a spot of bother, actually, because I'd helped a large US financial services company in the automotive space. I won't talk about client names per se. I'd helped with the M&A of a UK company, and they put me in as CIO for 12 months. And about 5 weeks in, we were sitting around the boardroom table, and the CEO brought out the existing business strategy for the firm, flipped over, mission, provide the lowest cost automotive finance with the best range of products and the best customer service, and everyone's nodding sagely. And I'd been there 5 weeks at that stage, and I was 31, so a bit young, maybe wet behind the ears on how to deal around an executive table. And I said, that doesn't make sense, guys. And everyone said, what do you mean? You've only been in the automotive industry for 5 weeks. I said, well, sorry to rain on your parade. I actually don't think you're in the automotive industry. But we've got 75,000 vehicles under lease around the country to British Airways and Marks and Spencer and all these big important firms. I said, I get that. But as your CIO, I said, I actually think we're in the information business because, the customers, they're typically a CFO or a HR director, and they've got a problem called, I've got hundreds or thousands of people who've got the right to get a fully serviced vehicle as part of their package. And so we actually take away the information management problem so that they can get on with their business. I said, look, can I come back and give you my thoughts on Thursday? Because I used to go up to Birmingham on a Monday morning, back on a Wednesday afternoon, and then on Tuesday afternoon, then up on Thursday morning. So I remember being on the train, Virgin train out of Euston up to Birmingham, and I'm thinking, rightio, I've got to be able to explain why I can see and say, these things. And so I came up with this approach and saying, well, yes, I may not have worked in your business, but all businesses fundamentally work the same. They have a DNA in the same way that humans do. And so I articulated that as basically, for a given focus, what value are you trying to create? You've got to attract people to it. You've got to contract people if they're interested. I'll give you that magazine if you give me $10. You've got to be able to transact it. I've actually got to give you the magazine. You've got to give me the $10. That's the two-way promise we just created in the contract. And if the magazine's good and I like your $10, we'll do business again. Everything's the same. And I said to them, it doesn't matter whether you're a post office, a florist, or doing full-service washing machines. Businesses and what they do are fundamentally the same. And so I said, I came up with this model and I said, so you think it's all about sales, and I can see your people popping champagne corks when they do a deal. I'm in the next building across, but I can see through the glass. And I've got a team of IT people that I'm managing. And we're going, that deal sheet, how do we actually do that? Our systems aren't set up for this. So you think you're making money there, but you're blowing it out the back door via me. So I said, we need to think about the business differently. And I said, if I can propose to you that this is actually about an information management business and the cars are driven by your customers' employees, but your customer wants the information, insurance, roadside assistance, FBT, et cetera, we will transform this. The CEO got it, and we ran it through the business. So we reorganised the business around that. That CEO became the global CEO. He took this model. We ran that model through Europe, Mexico and Australia, I think, as well. So that was the genesis of F.A.C.T.S. It was me having to explain why I just thought a bit differently, I suppose.
And it's such a granular way of breaking down challenges. Like, to this day, to your credit, I when I'm stuck with a customer, I'll say, F.A.C.T.S. and run through it. And it's a very simple way to actually get some clarity. So
what does F.A.C.T.S stand for?
So focus, attract, contract, transact, and then only two things will ever happen. You'll either sustain the business because you both delivered on the transact, the promise, or you'll suspend because one of you didn't work for you. That's fine, but you still learn from that process as well. We do the same thing when we put a body through the MRI to work out, okay, where are the issues in the body? Because once we know where those issues are, then we can go and make a healthier body. A business is just a body. It's full of cells that run around trying to be important and do things and that they're meant to do. And when they don't work, that's when projects arise. Because then you go, that's not working. What do we do?
I want to circle back to you. So you said you essentially were a consulting CIO at 31 to quite a big automotive industry. It's a pretty big feat. How did you get there before we unpack where you're at now? Because getting to that 31 is pretty impressive.
I've been working since I was 7.
Okay.
I'm actually not kidding. No, my parents were slave drivers. No, they weren't. No, I literally did my first paid day's work as a 7-year-old. Mum and Dad had a curtain and wallpaper shop up at Ashgrove. Yeah. I'd minded my little brother, and Dad gave me $1 the Saturday before when they were at a dog show down at Redlands. And when Dad gave me that $1, he saw my eyes light up, and he goes, "Oh, do you want to come into the shop and do some work?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." And he gave me $1 for working on half Saturday because you got any work. Shops could only be open back in the old days. We're talking, and so I've been around customers and dealing with adults, I suppose, since I was 7. So by the time I was 31, I'm not great at maths, but I had 20-something years of work experience.
Yeah.
So and as I said, I've got a great affinity and love for business, and I'm really passionate about the way in which people and teams and businesses create value. So because I'm inquisitive and a problem solver, I love getting in there and turning the thing around. So F.A.C.T.S really was an extension of me to be able to explain what people ask me quite frequently. How do you understand our business so quickly? Well, I don't. I understand the patterns of business. Then I need a way in which I can engage with you together so that we can pinpoint how it can improve.
Okay. And how did you have a tech? Did you study tech in between that, $1 for looking after the younger brother and CIO at 31? Did you study technology as well?
Yeah. Look, I worked, first job out of school was with Logan City Council. Right. So they actually gave me a cadetship to go through uni, do my first degree. And I think it was about 1988, I think it was. I spent a year working in what was then called the EDP department, the Electronic Data Processing. And so, I learned a lot, but I already had, I think some skills in that space. I was I think kids at that stage were starting to learn to use, computers at school and stuff. And so, we were just at that stage where it was all just starting to happen, I think, and I gravitated towards it. I moved on to look after the Australian Stock Exchange help desk for Brisbane for the automated trading system back then as well, and then finished uni and nipped off to on a world tour as it was then, 1 year gap year, and 5 years later anyway came back married, having lived in Finland, learnt to speak another language, and had done some more tech type stuff over back in London as well. So I sort of gravitated into it, but I walk a line between, if you like, technology and business. I mean, everything has to serve an outcome. It's not tech for tech's sake. But for what outcome? How does it drive a human outcome or a business outcome forward. And so I walk that line between the two. So I suppose I'm a bit of a translator in some respects.
Stu, on that vein, can you share any real moments of technology transformation apart from that insurer you mentioned that you've really seen a massive uplift in that organisation? Any examples of stuff that you've done?
Well, I'd go back to the UK when we were talking about the F.A.C.T.S, where the genesis of that. There was a situation where on a weekly basis, I think from memory it was about 50 of their clients would get a floppy disk with the database on it so that they could then go and update it at that end. Now, we're talking 1990. Right? So the internet was just starting to become a useful thing, but prior to me arriving, use of the internet at work was banned. So one of the first things I did was say, well, that's silly because that's the future. And so we talked about the why and the like. And so even that was a little bit transformative, that people were across the business were allowed to investigate and use the internet in the hope that they become familiar with it, so that as we then roll things forward. So, for example, that particular floppy disk system, I laugh about it now, but we somehow engaged a Russian outfit to actually develop a system to automate that and enable real-time exchange of information. You think about it now, it's ludicrous that we chose Russians, but anyway. But that again was transformative. The CEO came to me one day and said, Stuart, we need a call centre. I went, no problem, Len. I'm pretty sure the technology is there. We can put one on Mars. Why? Why do we need one? Oh, everyone else has got one. Maybe. Why? I didn't object to it. I was just trying to make sure he could actually understand or help mount a case as to what value would having people able to respond in a more coordinated fashion, what would that do for the customer's businesses as well as the client's business?
I think you've got a unique skill, Stu, which we mentioned in the show a fair amount, which is that technology translation to the business. And there's a lot of gaps with a lot of IT managers and CIOs. And that's what I think why you've just kind of accelerated so much in your career, because that is an art form to not just go, cool, well, what tech are we getting? And then put a business case of, I want this many dollars for this technology, but actually creating questioning it first and then putting a business case is like, no, we're doing it for this reason to move the business forward this way. So that's well done.
Well, I think before Simon Sinek came out with you start with why. I think Stu coined it first, right? Yeah. So I learned it from you about 14 years ago.
I won't lay claim to that. It was... I think it's just one of the most basic things of being a human. When people feel in control of anything, they're more likely to sign up.
It's
so
funny,
if they understand the why, that's them engaging. That's the first bit of engagement.
It's funny, and also what you said about floppy disk and saying you can't go on the internet and that kind of stuff. That's quite funny. So it's almost like now there's a lot of businesses with AI who are like, ban AI, ban ChatGPT from being used in our business, that kind of thing, because it shares data. I feel like that's the same kind of thing with the internet back in the early 90s, right?
Absolutely. You've got to experiment, because how do you learn?
Very much so. So let's pivot a little bit. So what are the common challenges you're hearing from businesses in 2023?
Well, if I could say it's both opportunity and challenge, and I'd go back to people. No surprise in that for me everything goes back to people. But look at our context. Lowest unemployment rate in a long time. 3.5%. If you overlay that with, I think, particularly coming off the back of years of good times, so to speak, as well. People are used to getting things perhaps a little bit more easily. There's a sense of waiting or relying on businesses or the government to give me what I'm due. And I'm not just talking the millennial supposed mindset, and I dispute that. I think it's too broad a brush to think that millennials just want things too early. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that people aren't as readily available to look after themselves and commit to things which sometimes are a little bit hurty. And so there's a lot of me first and then everyone else. And so particularly when you're on projects, and I've seen this, and this is probably, if you like, one of the unfortunate parts, when I'm in a consulting leadership role, so program director or the like, yeah, look, I have no joy in moving people on from a project. But I do those things because it's necessary sometimes to make sure you've got the right team. If I can't help an individual or a team become a better version of themselves, then I have to go and find someone else. In a low unemployment environment, unfortunately, some people will opt out because things can get a bit hard. And for me, in the space I'm in, when you are going, in a journey from a point A to point B, it's always going to be hard. Because if change was easy, everyone would be able to just do it, right? So for me, when you've got context like we do at the moment, so low unemployment, rising interest rates, new technologies, they're probably you've got an abundance of government scrutiny or legislation or the like as well. Yeah, you've got all these forces on businesses that. From a business owner's perspective, one more thing to deal with. From an individual's perspective, I just want to turn up. I want to do a good job if I can, but if I don't like it, there's another one over there. And so there's all these things swirling around at the moment where businesses like stability. Unfortunately, if you try to stay stable, you're going to go the way of the dinosaurs. So it's about finding that way through. And so some of the research I've been doing, just to sort of parlay into some of the extracurricular activities, as I mentioned, I've always done a lot of high performance sport. Last 4 or 5 years, I think it is, I've been really focused on mountaineering. Not something I would have ever picked, by the way, but I think it was just my time in New Zealand, beautiful country and lots of mountains. But some of the reading and just the experience, like if you want something bad enough, it's a bit of a cliche to say you'll find your way there. Probably a better way to put it is you'll find a way to navigate there. And it's some of those skills and ways of working, I think, that when I'm working with a business, I can draw those parallels between the physicality of personal objectives and how do we get individuals and teams and businesses aligned so that we can go on a journey to a significant place that is worth getting to, not as a death march, because that's a poor form of leadership, but on a day-by-day basis, looking for people to bring their A game. We may not have full certainty, we may not have full control of this, but by working on, as I said night before, it's about resilience as well. How do we help people navigate? So for me, I want to make sure that when they're at work, they're working with as much certainty as we can provide, that they're working in a healthy tempo, they've got healthy and respectful relationships with each other, and we try to avoid friction, but it's just an inevitable part of being human. And so, I think you've got to do that while all this other stuff's going on outside the building, so to speak.
So you're saying, Stu, that what you're seeing, the challenges that businesses are facing is finding people. People aren't as loyal, so maybe retaining people and then getting them engaged on the journey and then managing those people are the biggest challenges you're seeing.
You said that so much better. I should have said that at the start.
I'm just summarising. I do want to unpack that actually, but I want to ask you something that I didn't prep for beforehand. What's your opinion of the whole working from home thing these days? Because there's been a lot. There was an old Victorian premier who said that people who getting work from home 100% of the time should essentially get paid less than people that are in the office full time. What's your thoughts?
Jeffrey says a few things, and he's quite a wise individual. I don't agree with him on that one, though.
Okay.
No. I think it's about balance. I think people have become used to it. I think there are certainly some benefits in workplace flexibility. I think even beyond the immediate human ones and immediately for the business. If you can be productive and work from home, great. I don't think it's applicable for all roles. I'm not quite sure how that would work for a nurse, for example. I mean, other than the great nurses that move around, firefighters, etc.
Well, that was his point, was that those people should get paid more, or that people work from home should get paid less.
But yeah, maybe I only saw the sound bites then, because it didn't quite. It's quite a layered, structure that you would have to put in place. But I think the technology, it's forced us to use technology. So certainly travelling less is a good thing. It's good for the environment. It's good for costs, etc. Qantas has accommodated it by putting airfares up. Good on them. But I think if we've got more, I think it comes back to flexibility. I think working from an office is important for culture. It's for that those water cooler conversations, etc. So I think being in an office is great for culture. It's hard to replicate that over Zoom or Teams or whatever.
We're an IT company and we struggle with that culture remotely too.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, over the last, since COVID hit, to be honest, I mean, I've probably only done 10% of my work time in front of clients. I've had one whole engagement, with CEO and executive team in Victoria. I never even met them.
Wow.
Not even once. Over a 6 or 7 month period of that engagement. It was remarkable. Could it have been better? Because that was in the throes of COVID. Could it have been better? Absolutely. I mean, some FaceTime and whiteboards and all that sort of thing. Yeah, that could have accelerated things. But so I think it's a blend. I think that's what we've got to look for, and I think it's to mandate it, for example, across a public service. I don't think that's healthy. I think it's got to come down to what is the business, what roles are involved. So I think when it starts to get put into some sort of instrument like an enterprise agreement, I think that's starting to stray into it's being a little bit too favourable for the employee, whereas I think the business needs to have just an adult conversation with all of its employees about what works for the business. Because if we do well as a business, you do well as an employee. So let's have a chat.
So let's unpack that one a little bit then, because I think definitely that managing people, if they're all remote, is definitely harder. No one's going to argue that way. If you can swing around the chair and speak to someone, it's easy to manage those people. So at a high level, how do you get staff or people engaged in the business's vision?
It's got to make sense for a start. Look, it's got to have a purpose. I mean, because I think it's easy to wordsmith stuff, but if people don't believe it, they're not going to sign on. If they can't see themselves in that, they're either going to stay for the journey because maybe they're getting paid well and they'll just pretend to be busy and pretend to be engaged, etc., or they'll leave. So authenticity is important. Strategy also needs to be executable. I have done a lot of projects off the back of Big Four 140-page slide packs. They are beautiful. It's not that they're useless. And this isn't not trying to slag them off in terms of their utility, but there is a missing link between going from your research and analytics of a market and what have you, and those guys have got the bandwidth to do that well, and they generally do. But when they stray across the line of, but how do we do this? That's where I start putting my hand up. And I think there is a join point, a necessary join point to say, there's our strategy, but our next step in this is executable strategy. And if you miss that point, for me, errors of execution start. That's where the seeds are, which I typically pick up, some months or whatever later, which is when I think mentioned earlier. Sometimes you've got to go backwards before you can then go forward. You've got to go back to root. This isn't working. I thought we've got a great plan. Look at this PowerPoint pack. That's not the plan. That doesn't engage people. So to your question, it has to be simple to understand. It's got to be purposeful, and it's got to be something that people can, your team can absolutely sign up for. If it's missing any of those, seeds of doubt have already begun to creep in.
Yeah, it's very hard. You can create as much strategy in the world, but without the execution, that's probably the hardest part. What's your advice for getting the most out of individual staff one-on-one?
Well, again, do they understand their role? Do they understand why they're playing that role? Does it align to their objectives? Are they skilled enough? Do they have the tools to do that job? Do they have a good leader? Do they have an environment within which they can work? So sometimes, I'm not a project manager, program director. I take those titles on. The only way I've ever been able to, probably adequately describe it is I create environments where successful outcomes become possible. And that's a very broad role title. But within it, it's basically, it goes back to facts. I look for what's missing so I can go and help fix those. And again, I'm not some Mr. Fix-It, but I work with people who can. So once I've identified, what needs to carry forward, what do you leave behind, and perhaps what do we need to do differently, then people start to get that clarity about the project mission. Because if the business knows what its overarching mission and vision is, then the projects to help improve the musculature or the breathing or the whatever that is not adequate for that, because a project is about adaptation to a different sort of demand. And so again, this is, if you like, some relatively recently, learnt theory about, when we do exercise, we're doing it for a reason. An elite swimmer doesn't all of a sudden decide to take on the dietary advice of a sumo wrestler, for example. They're not going to swim real fast if that's they follow that path. But they might follow the path of someone who's breaking world records and the like as well. Business is the same. We don't do projects just for the fun of it. They hurt. They use money. They burn people out. But if we know that clarity about why, and we're really sure on that, and people are signed up, that's that mission question you asked before. A project has a mission. Our mission is to do this so that we can go from point A to point B. If everyone's clear on that, then people start to understand their role. They understand their role in the team. That team understands its role in the business as well. Everyone does a great job. Business moves on. It grows. Something else will change. It'll do another project, so on and so forth. There's no finish line. It's one of my favourite lines from Nike, actually.
Stu, you've been someone that's always parachuted into fixed challenges. I think, I've known you for a while. Are there three common traits that you see leaders or business owners consistently fail at, which causes the people to lose that disconnect? What would three traits that I'm sure if you look at all of your experience, would be, and I guess listeners here will go, well, look, hang on a second, I've got that in my business, maybe I should ask Stu for help. But what are the three common traits that you see?
Yeah. Again, lack of clarity about the why. Things that can look good on a 140-page slide pack sort of can mask that real clarity. There's a great quote attributed to Abraham Lincoln at the end of a rather lengthy letter that he wrote to someone that said, I apologise for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. Yep. So that work to really distill down the why, because if you can't say to people in a really short space, if you need 140 pages, quite frankly, to say why something needs to be done, no, it's not going to happen. Yep. That's background material. You've got to be able to wrap it up on a page so that people engage. So that's the first one. Second one is having, I think, moved too quickly from right, we've got a plan. Let's go. For me, a lot of people sometimes, or a lot of projects sometimes get a lot of what I call BAU people who are used to the rhythms of your normal business cycle. Oh, he or she's fantastic. Yeah, get them onto the project. Just because they're good there doesn't necessarily make them good on a project. It's like saying, oh, that person's great at sales. Let's make them the sales manager. Look, there's whole podcasts on how that is not a great idea, right? The same thing. So for me, as part of preparation for what is invariably going to be a long, intense period of doing hard stuff, preparation is important. Making sure that you get people. So for me, it's almost like there's BAU people and there's project people. It's not that you don't work together. It's not like, entirely different animals. But project people are probably, they're highly goal-oriented. They've got probably shorter attention spans. They thrive on challenge and complexity and making sense of things. That's not a it's not calling out BAU people. They just solve different challenges, different tempos, etc. Should they be on projects? Absolutely. I mean, probably in SME roles to make sure that there's a bridge between point A and point B. No project should just go off into the ether and build stuff and then come back a year later and go, ta-da, for people just to go, but that's not what I wanted.
Yep.
Okay. So, vision clarity, preparation. And I think that the third one is just making sure that people are looked after. It's like, throwing on a high-performing footy team on and not allowing the strapper or the water runner to come on at times as well. People get hurt doing projects. Change is hard. It's physical. Longer hours, changing minds. Joe's left. Oh, okay, who's going to replace Joe? Things happen. So looking after people and being ready to look after people, that's part of your preparation. So they'd be my three things, because I see them at the start and the getting ready to go and the early stages, because I typically get called in an early stage of things don't feel right.
Yep.
And people call it. And that's a gutsy move to call that a project's not going well, because that starts hurting egos. So ego, actually, if I can pick a fourth thing, ego. If people can just be a little bit less about ego and more just calm and rational and the like, don't force change. Forced change doesn't work.
Yep. Sounds so simple, but that's actually really good advice. So, thanks.
What you mentioned before, that part of what you do is try and find out what's not moving forward and like identifying it. What's the process you go through, Stu, to identify the biggest gaps in businesses?
Well, back to F.A.C.T.S. I need a model, I suppose, to visualise how a business is structured. So again, attract, contract, transact, sustain, for example. Take focus as well. For me, focus is about strategy, governance, leadership, etc. Attract is about marketing and getting people interested in whatever it is you're selling and the like. Contracting is about making sure that you can come up with an agreement that we've got something that we can exchange. Transact is about delivering the goods. And sustain is saying, did that work for you? Can we do that again at some point? So I need a model like that, so I can go into an organisation and as quickly as possible understand not just what it's selling, but how it's working. And I look for how people are engaged, because if marketing don't do their job well, the salesmen aren't going to be busy. If a salesperson over-promises, then how do you deliver? And so people won't want to do business with you again.
And then the delivery's bad. Then they
and
won't
if
want to come
delivery's
back
bad,
after, right?
people won't want to come back either. So there's this flow that goes through a business. So I look for flow. I look for barriers to that flow, I suppose. And then you say, is it a process issue? Might be a product issue. Might be a service issue. So they're the typical three things that bring about blockages, because marketing services sales, sales services your transact people. So there's internal flow, but at each point you're still dealing with a prospective customer. In marketing, from selling socks. I want to speak to you, Jackson, about the great socks that we've got, and whatever the selling mechanism is, whether it's online or direct sales. Someone knocking on your door to sell you some socks. They don't do that these days, I'm supposing. But there are humans. There are humans involved in that chain. So now that applies whether you're selling a banking product, mining equipment. As I said, flowers, cars. It's all fundamentally the same. And you could close a Commonwealth Bank branch, for example, on a Friday, redo the livery and what have you, and you could be selling flowers there on a Monday. Physical presence, a way to sell. Put in place the right product and people to do that. So businesses are fundamentally the same. It's just in the same way that humans share 90-odd% of our DNA, and yet we look different. We're interested in different things. It's the same with the business. So for me, getting in early with a model, looking for the blockers, and that's where your project issues are going to be. Fix those. nothing. I mean, you can end up sort of plugging holes in the dike every now and then. Something else will pop out. As I mentioned before, the one over in New Zealand, about 12 months in, I think it was, there was another takeover offer. Quietly, because I was under an NDA, I actually had to slow the program down. So this is about 150 to 170 people. I had to slow down. I wasn't even allowed to tell them why we were slowing down. People thought I was mad that I wasn't trying to bring this program to a conclusion. But we had to slow it down because we were under due diligence.
Yeah, things happen. But pivot, I'm sure COVID probably made you pivot that other project as well.
Well, I'm glad that happened after. Otherwise, as I said, I would have probably been, because I was flying over backwards and forwards.
Right.
I did 55 return trips to Auckland over a 2-year period. So
in that kind of like F.A.C.T.S analogy, when you're looking at a business trying to find where the biggest gaps are, how do you then prioritise where to start first?
Yeah. Well, F.A.C.T.S is fundamentally, it's a way of communicating with business stakeholders. It's not just my tool to use. It's the one perhaps I bring, but it's a translation device. It enables me to say, well, look, here's some issues that we've discussed and we're seeing. Let's look at the impacts of these because you can't make all change instantaneously. As I said, change hurts. So which ones are we going to work on and in what priority and what resources are we going to give them? And maybe we'll do that much of all of that you could do because that'll do for now so that we can move on to the next thing. So prioritisation is probably one of the key things, I think, in any either business performance oriented change process, because again, it's constraints of resources, time, money, people, etc. Comes into play.
So how do you weigh that up? Do you weigh the opportunity if you do a project here, for example, or the risk if you don't? What kind of method you use to help prioritise?
Yeah, well, so I mean, once you understand where the issues are, then you say, well, what are our options for resolving that? It might be a Band-Aid. A Band-Aid, sometimes a Band-Aid's fine. It's only when you've got Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids, then you've probably got a problem. So you've got to have a very transparent conversation with, usually executives and leaders in the organisation. I think one of the key things, depending on what scale of organisation, you may need to get the board involved as well. And I think so some of the work I've been doing around agile thinking, not just agile processes, so it's not just about stand-ups and 3M sticky notes and all of that. I mean, they're the things you use, but it's the practice, it's the mindset, the agile mindset that's important. So depending on the scale of your organisation, if there's a board and it's providing corporate governance services to the business, then you've got to engage them on the journey as well, because that's the only way you're going to get a business case of some scale across the line. If you're dealing in a private company and you're dealing with an owner, then that's probably one of your key stakeholders. But you've got to be able to describe, and this is why F.A.C.T.S, it's a very visual process as well. I mean, it's literally a heat map that you end up drawing out of all the steps in that flow of business. And first time we did it on Nigel's business, I remember him sitting back going, my God, I can see my business up on the wall. Yeah. and it's quite a powerful moment. And it starts the conversation about, well, we can't do it all. So what are we going to do? Then you've got permission to get down to that next level and say, well, we've got options for each of these issues. And it ranges from, we could put all of our effort there, or we could spread effort across a range of things and try and lift the organisation. So it's a maybe a long way round to answer the question, because there's no specific way.
There's not a do this first, right? Yeah,
there's not a do this first. It's not saying that marketing's more important than selling. It just depends on the circumstances.
I had a couple other questions for Stu. Nigel, do you have anything else you want to follow?
No, mate, I love listening. I'm very conscious that Stu has so much to share, and I was going to think that we're going to run out of time. So cover your questions, and we'll have to get Stu back into all those exciting projects you're working on to share more into the future. So.
We may need a part two, mate. But let's. I think the one thing I wanted to pick your brain on was change. Why is change so hard? And what is an example where an organisation that you've led or been part of, whatever, has done change really well?
Change is just hard for humans generally. We like patterns. We think we're very sophisticated. We're just sophisticated animals in a way. There's patterns. We wake up, we need some brekkie. We want to feel meaningful, we want to feel loved, etc. But what we most want, and I think, is we actually want to feel in control. And so once we've got a sense of control, someone else coming along saying, oh, I'd like you to do this differently, that's disruptive. It disrupts your sense of control, because all of a sudden you've got to apply energy to probably not only doing that thing, but maybe doing a project or just doing some change that's different to what you've got used to. So it's inherently jarring to how we go through our day. But if we go through that appropriately, and if we can, make sure that people understand the benefits, there's a variety of little, graphs and memes and all sorts of things that go along with this. And typically, you change people will use those and bring them out to help people, go across the divide of despair or whatever it is in change. And different people feel it different way. I mean, I love change, but I still react to it. But because I've been doing it and helping people for so long, I've probably got mechanisms for coping with it a bit differently. So again, I think different organisations, depending on how much change they've had or experienced or need to, like if you've got a burning platform project, if people can see the fire, they're either going to jump and run the other way, or they're going to go and get some hoses and start hosing this thing down, and they'll contribute to making the change. In terms of an example, look, I'm working with a client at the moment, and it's a relatively small business in the scheme of things. They've been going for about 7-8 years, I think now. They're good at what they've been doing, but they got me involved because they wanted to do something a little bit more difficult and the like. And I can tell you, and mention this to Nigel on the way in, because I've been dealing with some of the things today. What I'm dealing with is the hurt of making change. The reactions I'm getting from some parties in the business are not rational relative to certain facts. Part of my job is to help them deal with that. Whilst it might be rational, it still hurts. So getting through it, and even what we've got through now, I mean, quite frankly, we're so close to the end of this project. Where they were a year ago and where they are now is chalk and cheese. It really is. It gives them a platform to do other projects of this scale, more professionally, safely, financially, beneficial, etc., reputationally, etc. But because of where they are in the cycle of this one particular project, it's a little bit like that. The time at which long-term prisoners are most likely to escape is in the final year of their long-term sentence.
Right.
You are so close to the end, it is just almost cripplingly hurting, and I want to escape. But if you can just hold on, and this is, if you like, part of the almost the coaching element of what I do with people is to try and help them towards that rationality so that they can persevere and get to that end point, so you can breathe normally again, go, wow, actually, this isn't a bad place, is it? No. And you know what? Next time, you'll still feel pain, but you'll go to another plateau as well. And that's how businesses grow. And again, it's the same thing with my mountaineering. I started off on a little couple of 1,000-metre mountain in New Zealand and went to Everest base camp, and that's 5,500 metres. I was in Argentina in January. That was almost 7,000 metres. You don't just wake up one day going, right, I'm off to Everest. See you in a few weeks, hun. It doesn't work that way. You've got to work towards these things, and that to me is part of that. That similarity between business and human performance. There's a lot we need to learn, because it comes back to being human and how do we grow as individuals.
There's something crippling if you ever look at like a traffic map, the times of day that cars travel around. If you look at one of those and see people get up always at the same kind of time frame on the same road, we look like ants. That really like hits you and go, oh, we are just sheep.
Creatures of habit. Right?
Yeah, creatures of habit.
Well, therein lies one of the benefits, I think, of COVID, because for a little while there, it reminded us we could still do work and we had fewer cars on the road. It was great for the environment. It was great for people's mental health in some respects, I think, for a while there. So I don't
think great for people's health. Really?
Mental health in terms of, it took a while to adjust, but once people started realising, hang on, I can work from home. Now, I don't think it's fully the answer, but I don't think we've explored working from home to its full benefit yet, because if we can stop people creating a peak hour, that's great for traffic management, great for the environment, probably great for people's mental health, because you don't arrive at work after an hour on the Pacific Highway with road rage. If you could work on different days, you're easing traffic burden, you're easing people's mental strain of getting to work, etc. So we're not done yet with the work from home. Just rounding back to your question.
No,
before.
I do agree, because I think there's a lot of different people, right? And some people need that water cooler talk and interaction with people to function well. Yep. And so a lot of people have actually had a negative mental health from the sort of people in Victoria in particular who are like forced to work from home, that kind of thing.
If you're forced to, not a great outcome. If we can find that balance, great for the individual, great for business, great for the environment.
Yep.
Different personalities, I guess, depends on what they need. But in some individuals, definitely.
Personalities, role types.
Yeah. What's next for Stuart Waddington?
Well, actually, it's been an interesting year. I actually put a LinkedIn post out about it a week or two ago, I think it was, because my son, who's at uni, said to him about a year ago, do you want to come and try consulting? He's doing finance law at uni, and he's been working for a legal firm for about 3 years, and he's really enjoyed that. But I said, well, do you want to actually explore the business side? So he's been doing a bit of work with me over the last year, and we just clocked up the anniversary of him working with me a couple of weeks ago. And what I've loved about that is it's reminded me of the importance of actually working with other people, but on a collegiate sort of basis as well, because he's brought a young person's views and questions and whatever. He's challenged me, so he's got we've gone through the learning curve of him trying to see what does Dad do. He's become a credible individual in his own right, and he's actually worked on some pretty cool gigs over the last 6 months. So we're exploring where that could go. Because that could be interesting if it was to become an intergenerational business type thing. I'm hoping I've got a good 10 years left of me doing what I do, because I love it. But equally, in 10 years' time, he'll be 32, and he'll be at that age where good runs on the board as well, and I think he's really got an affinity for understanding how businesses could perform and how change can be made as well. So that in a personal business side of things is perhaps my next big thing. Equally too, as I said, he's 22. My daughter's 19. She's doing engineering. I'm going to go through my own transformation, I suppose, in the next year or two to find out. Wife of 31 years, we're going to start looking at each other and going, God, we've just got the 6-month-old dog around now. What do we do? And that all parlays into how we live our lives, our control. Because for a while, we've had to learn how to be parents and still learning. Now we're learning how to let go of kids into the wild themselves.
Downsizing, adventuring, mountain climbing.
I love being fit, and I love doing things which are a bit unusual, I suppose. Just as much as anything, not just tick a box, but I love pushing and seeing what I can do. Did a 54k trail run on Saturday and plumb some new depths on the physical side of things there to keep going. It's good fun.
Awesome. Stuart, mate, thanks for coming in and sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks, fellas.
Yeah, Stuart, I've got to say, in wrapping up, you've always been someone that's open to a conversation, willing to lend an ear, challenging the status quo. Hats off to you. You'll have my respect forever, mate. So, thanks, really mate. Appreciate everything you've done to help not just me, but so many other organisations. So, thank you.
Mate, it's been great knowing you all these years, and hopefully that'll continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks for listening.